All right, let's get underway, everybody. You've all got busy lives. The topic of tonight's webinar is predator-free management on the farm, and let's just kick into it. And like you say, Cam will share some gems that you can take away from this.
Thank you, Nick. So Jesse and the team have been working on this kaupapa for a while. The predator-free community takes many forms and works in a lot of landscapes. And we've tended to focus on communities that are working in reserves or in patches of bush or conservation land along rivers and stuff. But the reality is there's a huge farming landscape, productive landscape in New Zealand, and there's some amazing work being done by farming families and farming enterprises in this space as well. So we thought we'd share the love around what on-farm predator management might look like for those who want to explore it a bit more. So that's really what tonight's all about. Our farming landscapes are incredibly diverse, from coastal runs to high country runs and everything in between, dry country, damper country. There's a whole lot of reasons we might do predator control on the farm. The obvious one from a production perspective is protecting your primary production, your feed, your crops. We know that possums and rats can lay waste to all sorts of valuable items. Your infrastructure, your pump sheds, in your other sheds and dairy structures. A lot of high-tech gear these days. Rats love to chew wires, so protecting infrastructure. Disease control is an important one in New Zealand. We know that possums and ferrets spread bovine tuberculosis, but rats can spread leptospirosis through their urine. Cats have toxoplasmosis. So there's disease issues on the farm. Biodiversity is an increasing one. We all love wildlife on our farm, the kiridu and the kowhai trees and the likes, the waterfowl in our wetlands, catchment protection of our wetlands, planting up our riparians, our estuary margins, our lakes and ponds. That can enhance it for biodiversity, but pests can do a terrible amount of damage in those riparian sites. For those of us who enjoy duck hunting, ferrets and cats and rats do an enormous amount of damage to our waterfowl. So they're competing with us for our recreation, and generally pest control on the farm can contribute to general land sustainability. So, there's a whole lot of reasons why we do pest control. The costs of management, we all need to consider how much we spend in any business enterprise. With pests, I'll explain this graph a little bit. We've got pest density going up the vertical axis and cost per animal removed going along the vertical axis. It's relatively cheap to halve a population. It costs you a lot more to halve it again, and it can cost you 10 times as much to halve it again. So as you squeeze the numbers down, the cost of doing management increases. But for a lot of our pests, we've actually got to get them to reasonably low levels to stop the impacts that they create. It's about having a good strategy for achieving that in a cost-effective manner. So, it's not just about delivery. A lot of people just want to jump out there and put kit in on the farm. If you think about what you're trying to achieve, design something that'll deliver that cost effectively before you deliver it, you can save yourself a lot of cash. So there's a few tips on what we're going to cover tonight and what's in some of the support material to help with that. Which predators? All these animals on this page can be classified in some situations, in some landscapes, as some sort of a pest or predator. Many of us don't really dispute that rats and mustelids are pests. Wallabies are a big issue, and they have plenty for the damas and down the Waimate with the bennets. But when you start getting into the cat thing, a lot of people have very close emotional connections to their pet cats, and things start to get a bit blurry. Hedgehogs, a lot of us grew up with Mrs. Tiggy Winkle and have a romantic image of what hedgehogs do or don't, but the reality is they're in huge numbers in many of our landscapes, and they do an enormous amount of damage to our biodiversity. Pigs, we all love a bit of pig hunting, but everybody who farms knows what going down the back paddock and seeing it all turned over does in terms of damage to production and future weed problems. And increasingly, we're seeing deer numbers increase on a lot of properties. The reality is we aren't shooting enough deer. I love my deer hunting. I'm passionate about deer, particularly seeker deer. But we're seeing deer overabundance in too many landscapes now because we're not doing a very good job of clipping the numbers back. We're not shooting enough hinds to manage numbers. And I see devastation in some QE2 blocks that are fenced off from stock but are being ravaged by deer. So fallow deer in particular are a serious predator of a lot of our native bush areas. Even though we think of these animals as pests, the key point of this slide is that we value them differently for different human value judgment reasons, and that's an important issue to understand going forward. One of the key things that taught me about wildlife was drilling into understanding what they do, how they operate, who they are, what's their modus operandi, how big a home ranges do they have, what's their breeding rates, how far do they disperse, how does each use the habitat, what drives them, how and when. These issues help us understand what sort of devices we'll need, how many we'll need at what sort of spacings if we want to achieve realistic outcomes. Just killing a few pests doesn't really cut it. We've actually got to kill enough to make a difference. And so we have to understand a lot of this. And understanding animal behavior is really important too, just knowing that actually all animal behavior is driven by the 4 Fs: fear, food, fornication or promiscuity, subordinance, dominance, and fighting related to a lot of that. So if we understand some of those behaviors, we can be smarter about how we actually deliver pest management.
Shona Oliver just asked, are Canadian geese a problem for other areas? She must have them as a problem in hers.
Yeah, at Turangi here, we've got several, or hundreds and hundreds, I don't know, they're probably up to 1,000 or so now. They foul a lot of pasture, they eat a lot of grass, and that's the same through Canterbury, through Tauranga, through other parts of the country. So I'm not going to cover geese here. I'm covering mammalian pests, but yeah, absolutely, Canada geese are a bit of an issue. And when we look at management tools, there's a whole lot of tools out there. New Zealand has developed some incredibly innovative tools. We lead the world in pest problems, but we also, with our number 8 wire psyche, we tend to innovate and develop cool stuff. The thing to remember about pest management tools is that there's no silver bullet. We're all looking for, that one size fits all. Let's just do it. The other thing too is if you overuse a tool, it gets blunt. These animals are pests because they adapt, and if you use your tool too often, you'll get the easy ones, but it's the hard ones that will breed and pass on their genes to the next generation. We're breeding an increasingly cautious population of pests in a lot of places through overuse of one tool. It's really important to think about a mix of tools, mixing it up. The sort of philosophy I like to sort of preach is the right tool in the right place at the right time, used right, but mixed up. So, there's no perfect tool. They all have a place. There's some awesome tools just on this slide here. A lot of these are just clever New Zealand designs, but none of them are perfect. They all have advantages, limitations, and consequences, and we've got to understand those and use them carefully. In terms of rats, there's a whole lot of different types of tools out there. I really like the Victor snap trap, used in a box. It's very target specific. The good nature trap, if you use it carefully, and it can be devastating on rat populations. This photo here is of rats in the Kaimanas during the marsh year in 2019. And cool little devices like the D-Rat there that you can put up on trees out of the way of stock and other things. A lot of us use toxins. I'll talk a bit more about toxins later, but wherever you're using toxins for rodents, it pays to contain them in tamper-proof bait stations where the rats can't take large amounts of bait away, and you got to use these toxins carefully. But the cost of these tools is all different. Their efficacy or their efficiency is different, and you've got to mix it up. If you get a trap-shy pest, you'll need to poison it. But over time, if you overuse poisons, particularly acute poisons, you can get poison-shy or bait-shy pests, so you'll have to trap them. So that's, again, talking to that need to mix it up. and make sure, if you take a long-term perspective of your pest management, you want to make a difference, you want to kill enough to make a difference, you've got to mix it up. Mustelids are a major problem. Ferrets are increasing in a lot of landscapes. We've had 2 dry seasons in a row. Rabbits have gone through the roof. Ferret numbers are booming. That's a 2.3 kilo male that was 600 millimeters long. That's a big beast. My preference for mustelid control is still the DOC 200. DOC 200s are designed in New Zealand for New Zealand conditions. That's one of mine in the picture in the top right. Piece of mutton fat in the top, high up on the nail there. Baits, there's a whole lot of baits that work. Eggs are okay at this time of year when there's eggs in the landscape. Duck eggs are in the wetlands, pheasant eggs and stuff. I'm not a big fan of eggs logistically because they break in your pack and they're messy to use, and actually I find it better to blow them with a small nail, blow the contents out at the entrance of the trap and just put the egg as a visual cue inside the trap if I'm going to use eggs. Fresh rabbit is good. The erased blocks, which are a preserved rabbit bait, are pretty good, but they all go pretty manky really quickly. I found mutton fat lasts for a very long time, even in hot, humid climates. It doesn't get blown by maggots. Mice might get across your trap and chew it off the nail, but you can put a wee mouse trap in the other side there, and that mouse becomes another bait. So other pests can be a really clever bait. We'll see in this bottom left, this classic double set DOC 200 where a rat's caught in one end and a stoat's caught in another. So other pests. The DOC 250s are very good for ferrets, but if you open up the baffles a little bit, they can be devastating on cats as well. So what we've found in parts of the Central North Island where kiwi and feel have been getting hammered by ferrets and cats, that the DOC 250s opened up to bigger mesh holes will help you target feral cats. And again, if you're using meat baits, fresh possum, fresh rabbit where it's not too hot and humid, or mutton fat, and we'll talk about how to make these work better in a minute. You can target cats and ferrets with DOC 250s very, very effectively. Stoats, rats, and hedgehogs are really easily controlled in your DOC 200s, a little bit smaller, but getting hedgehogs out of DOC 200 is a bit of a pain, to be fair. Moving on to possums. Feral cats first. And I distinguish between pet cats and feral cats because there's a lot of emotion in the cat debate, and we know that feral cats are devastating predators and we need to remove them from our landscapes. But if you've got neighbours or you've got pet cats, I encourage you to try live cage traps first as a first attempt. Encourage your neighbours or put collars on your cats, so if you catch them, you know that it's somebody's pet, and you know you can take them back and ask your neighbour or your kids to look after them. If you want to target feral cats, though, there are some really good traps out there now. The DOC 250, as I've just talked about, the Steve Allen 3, which is that one on the left-hand side, on ramps, it's a pretty effective cat trap. And this new one, the Flipping Kitty, which is kind of designed around the Tim's trap, again, pre-fed and baited and well located, often using ramps. These can be pretty effective cat control tools. The thing about cats is they're very cautious creatures. You need to plan to remove them. Often you'll need to win their confidence with pre-feeding before you even set your trap. If you're focused on just getting out there and putting kit out there, a trap scare will make your moggy impossible to remove. So sometimes play the long game. Don't set your trap, pre-feed your trap for a few days or even a week. And when your bait's regularly going and you've won the confidence of that animal, often the first hit is your best hit. And if you can remove the animal with that, then you're going to save yourself a lot of grief. Don't be surprised with how many cats are in our landscape. So there are incredible numbers of cats out there at the moment, driven by 2 dry seasons and a lot of rabbits, just like the ferrets. Possums. Yeah, they're a nightmare. They're everywhere. They're very prolific in our landscapes. Night shooting's really effective in the springtime. Spring willow buds, larch buds, or pine catkins a bit earlier in the season, perhaps depending on where you live, August, September, targeting big old man pines. And then as the willow buds come on and the larch buds come on, you can remove an awful lot of possums with clever night shooting. You'll find that the moon phases after full moon are better. On the Māori calendar, the Tangaroa moon phase is a period of very high activity in the animal world. So choosing your weather, choosing your moon phase and the season can create a lot of very effective control very efficiently with night shooting. Kill traps as well. I like the flipping Timmies, which again is based on the old Tim's trap design. They work better with a ramp up to the trap. The Sentinel is another very good kill trap, or the Steve Allen 2 trap, which we'll see again in a moment. You can use the Trapinator. There are a number of the Warrior. There's a number of traps on the market. The key thing is to experiment with them and see what actually works. A lot of critters will have a look at your trap and go, yeah, no, I'm not going in there. So you've got to, again, win their confidence, lure them up, pre-feed them up, encourage them with food rewards to actually engage with your devices, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. Live traps are okay. The thing about live traps is you're required by law to check them every day. Leg hold traps, there's nothing wrong with leg hold traps. You could put your hand in one of those and it'll just hold your hand. It won't break your hand. And often a possum will be just curled up asleep in the morning. Very effective traps, probably one of the most important devices in possum management in New Zealand, in my view, the Victor #1 leg hold trap. But the cage trap put out in your orchard, just remember it's live trapping requires daily servicing by law. This wonderful photo on the bottom left of a possum and a rat at a bait station. Toxins are used extensively in New Zealand for both rat and possum control, and they interact at bait stations a lot, which is why I love this photo. If you're using toxins that don't require a controlled substance license, and those toxins that do are things like 1080 and phosphorus and ferrotox, the cyanide baits. You can go to the anticoagulants, things like pindone, or the new one on the market, double tap, which is cholecalciferol and diphacinone. Possums and rats between them will eat an awful amount of bait, so you've just got to be a little bit careful about how much you use and what your target species is and how you target them. You need to understand the tools. It's not a matter of just feeding hundreds of tons or hundreds of kilos of toxins out onto your farmland and hoping that it'll do the business. Toxins have a consequence, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment.
Howard Furlong, just while you're on possums, just said, why am I not trapping possums on my Trapinator? It's been 4 months with no catches after good success. He put, have I got smart possums?
You've killed all the easy ones, and who's left is a bit weary. So I'd shut your Trapinator down and lure it up with a whole lot of nice flour and cinnamon, icing sugar and cinnamon, or vanilla or peach or cloves or eucalyptus or whatever, and get them coming back to your site. So once you've won their confidence about coming back to your site, there's a really cool product that Connovation are putting out called Smooth Blue, which goes on the bite tab of the Trapinator. Put a bit of flour on a ramp underneath your kill trap, and a few pre-feeds of blue, Smooth Blue, and then put a bit of Smooth Blue or even a date up on your kill pad, and you might find you've removed the easy ones, the young ones, the dumb ones. Who's left is a bit more cunning, and you're going to have to change it up and get a bit smarter about it. I'll show you something on the next couple of slides which might help. This is a recent photo, maybe a month or so ago. You can see the willow in bud or early leaf there. There's pines in behind, and this planted in this waterway above this culvert to protect the catchment. The possums have just come off the catkins. They're now feeding in the willows. The reason that bait station is circled in red there, the reason that bait station is on the fence post seasonally, that's a really productive landscape to target your possums, because they're feeding on other things, pine catkins and willow buds in this case. You can fill that that bait station there up with something yummy, some pre-feed pellets or some cut carrots. If you live near Oakuni, you can buy a 50 ton of ugly, a ton of ugly carrot for $50. Chop it up and you can just spread carrot everywhere. It doesn't go off in the rain. It actually springs back to life. It doesn't go like soggy wheat bix like some pellets do. And you can attract them off those natural foods onto your bait station. And then you can do what I call the Possum nightclub. That's a tree that's been pre-fed for a couple of weeks, and everybody in the local village is coming there to party every night. There's some yummy treats and some hot girls, and everybody's there. The secret is you don't set those traps for a week or 10 days. You actually leave those traps unset. You feed it hard out. You lure it all up. Everybody comes. They take a bit of flour away or a bit of feed smell on their breath, on their whiskers, on their fur, on their fingers and hands, and they tell their mates, hey, come to this place. It's awesome. There's some really nice food and some really hot chicks, and we'll have a party. Then once you got everybody coming there, the pad runs that open up to a site like this are like State Highway 1. You set all your traps off. First night, bang, you fill them up. Second night, bang, you fill them up again. Third night, not so many. Fourth night, hardly any. Fifth night, job done. Move on. So this is the smarter, not harder approach to getting better outcomes. It's easy to catch the dumb ones, but yeah, multiple traps, pre-feeding, luring. Attention to detail about how you use your devices is really, really important. All these devices can work amazingly. Or maybe not this bait station down the middle at the bottom. You'd have to be Sered and Hillary to get into that one if you're a rat. So give your pests a chance. Don't make it too hard for them. You need to think about how your animals operate. That ramp up to that timber strap is going to increase the efficacy of that timber strap enormously, especially if you pre-feed the ramp with some flour lure and put a couple of treats of dates or carrot pieces or apple cubes around the place. Put a big neon sign up there saying open under new management. Come and visit, because otherwise most of them are just looking at that going, yeah, nah, there's a big danger, do not enter sign on that for some pests. You've got to encourage them. Attention to detail. There's no point having kit out there on the farm if your predators just ignore it. And I want you to really take heed of this statistic. If not, you take nothing else from this presentation, 80% of device encounters do not result in any pest interaction with that device whatsoever. So 4 out of 5 times that a pest comes to your device, he'll look in and go, yeah, nah, and walk away. How do you improve that? Because if you get that down to 50%, you'll more than double your catch rate. So you got to set every device like your life depends on it. You got to freshen up the site, make it exciting, scuff the ground. If you're a predator and something scuffed the ground, you go, what's happened here? Is a rabbit come and had a scratch, or is there a rat been playing here? Is there a food opportunity here for me? Pre-feeding and luring. If they haven't had a taste of what's in your trap before they get there, there's a big chance they'll just look in and just walk away. Use hazing, fencing, and guiding. So camouflage your trap a bit. Put a couple of logs around it to guide the pest to your trap. I'll show you some examples of that in a minute. Make sure the trap's going to work. Rusty, crappy old devices that sit out there for years with no maintenance have got more chance of scaring a pest and making it untrappable than catching it. So change your bait types up. An animal might not like mutton fat, or it might not like eggs, but it might like rabbit, or it might like possum. So mix it up. If you've always done what you've done, you'll always have what you've got. So if you mix it up, you got to make the trap site exciting. And when a predator turns up, he's got to go, yeah, I'm not going to have to check that out. This is one of my Doc 200 sets, and I'll just kind of explain what I've done here. This is a double set Doc 200 box. There's 2 traps in there. I've put these logs along a game trail. That's a game trail used by pigs and possums and deer and everything else in the bush. Hedgehogs, they're all playing on that game trail. That's animals they're not just randomly distributed in the landscape. They actually follow set paths, just like we do, our farm tracks, our path into town, whatever. I've scuffed the ground there. I've put flecks of mutton fat in that scuff. I've lured it with flour, and I've actually blazed that tree just beyond the trap with flour and icing sugar. That's going to create interest for possums and rats and hedgehogs to all come and have a look. They're going to lay down a scent trail to my trap box, and that scent trail is going to be uber exciting to cats and ferrets and stoats and weasels and rats and other animals. They're all going to start thinking, hey, there's something up here. And for the first 3 or 4 days after I've been there, that set like that is just gold. Inside, I've rubbed mutton fat on the baffles. I've got an egg on the nails inside. I've actually blown the egg, and the whole egg yolk and white is blown out into the leaf litter beside it. So it's a treat. He looks in and he sees an egg and thinks, oh, there's another one in there. You've just got to get inside the head of these guys and help them think, I've got to go in there. This is worth doing for me. So this is the kind of psychology of predator management that can make that 2%, 3%, 5% difference to your catch rates. It's not just about plonking kit out there and crossing your fingers. It's actually, you've got to work at it. The other statistic that you should think really carefully about is that 20% of traps catch 80% of predators. So again, they're not just randomly distributed in the landscape. They actually prefer warm, drier places. They're not going to live in the cold, wet, gooey places. So, use your animal runs. It's about location, location, location. Fence lines, roadways, drains, creeks, log crossings, along the edges of buildings. Just test it out. If you can see where they're causing pad runs along your farm tracks or in your pasture coming out of your bush blocks or your pine blocks, you'll see the signs. Monitor and critique every trap set. If it continues, doesn't catch, and critters are there, then shift it. It makes no sense having kit out there. That's a waste of time. So just move it around, try different stuff, but make sure you maintain your traps. You use good gear, because a trap scare is a trap shy critter, and they're incredibly quick. If something moves or it's not set right and they get a fright, then you're going to have to change up to toxins or something similar, because you've got a trap shy pest. I want to talk briefly about toxins, because they're a really important part of the toolkit, particularly for rodents, but possums as well. They're a potential contaminant for product, for meat and milk. You don't want residues going into your primary produce markets. It's just not sustainable farming. So you need to be careful how you use it. Around things like cow sheds, all your toxins have to be in contained bait stations. There'll be strict rules set down by dairy companies for those of you who farm dairy stock. But it just makes good sense that even when you're doing possum control and in the bush blocks, you got to look out for your dogs, your livestock, other wildlife. There's non-targets can get access to those. Some accumulate in the food chain, your brodifacoums and some of your second generation anticoagulants get into possums that get eaten by pigs, and they can get into your own food chain if you're pig hunters. So just all that sort of knowing your toxin, its fate in the environment, following the label instructions for use and disposal will make sure that that stuff's pretty well managed, and don't overuse it. It's just not a matter of continually feeding it out there. For a lot of critters, it'll take them 10 days plus to die. They'll have a feed, they'll feel no effects. After a few days, they'll come back, they'll eat some more, and then they'll start feeling crook and they'll die. So the more you give them, the more they'll eat in that time before they have a lethal dose and before they actually die. So it's really important to pulse toxins like pindone or difecinone or brodifacoum and stuff. make sure that you just give them enough to kill them, let time elapse for them to pass, and then maybe do it a month or 6 weeks or 2 weeks later, and always dispose of any surplus bait. So just basic common sense, really, but toxins are a really important tool. How we use them will dictate how long we have access to them, and whether the public acceptability of them will remain. Measuring success, I really like these. These are just core flu chew cards impregnated with peanut butter. They're 45 cents each. You put them out around and about the place to see if you've got rats or mice or hedgehogs or possums. They'll all bite these with very distinctive bite marks. And so you can see who's left. Just a warning about rat plagues in some of our beech forests and our polycarp forests when the fruit crops are really intense. And it might be the case in maize crops as well. Rats can be so prolific that they'll just shred all this white plastic onto the floor of your wherever you put the card, you know. So and then you can't tell who's been there at all. But a really good advice. It's not about how many you kill. It's actually what's left and where those critters are. That's really important if you want to have the most cost-effective pest management regime on your farm.
Anna's just asked, how high off the ground do you nail the core flute chew cards?
Oh, about 30 centimetres up. Yeah, and you can blaze a bit of flour around, do a stopper out, scuff the ground below the chew card and blaze a bit of flour there, blaze it up the tree beside it, encourage a bite. That possum there, he's chewed all the peanut butter out of the channels of that one on the bottom right. It'll just tell you who's there, where they are. You might find when you've had a bit of success that your numbers get limited to a few spots, and if you can keep those hot spots under the hammer, you'll make the most of the work you've put in getting the numbers everywhere else down. Good question. Excellent. So just a quick summary, really. Predator management can transform your farm, but you've got to take a really strategic approach or it can cost you a lot of money. If you know your predator and you think about how they operate in your farm environment, you can actually be far more effective, especially if you use that to have an attention to detail approach to your bait station layout and your trap or other device layout. It's about right tool, right place, right time, used right. Attention to detail, I can't stress that enough. But it is a long game, because as soon as you stop doing pest control, the numbers just rebuild, or they come in from neighbouring areas that haven't been controlled. So you've got to keep at it, and you've got to change it up regularly to stay ahead of the game, because your ones that you can't trap or won't touch your baits, you're going to have to try something different. Otherwise, they're going to survive and pass their knowledge on to the next generation. These animals are pests because they're adaptable, and we have to adapt to stay ahead of them. If you want more information about specific stuff, we've put together the Starter's Guide to Predator Control on Farms. It talks about tools, how far apart, how frequently you should set them, what they cost, some of the advantages and disadvantages of some of the toxins. There's a lot of variety out there, a lot of the traps. They're all valuable tools if they're used right, but they can all be hopeless if you use them wrong. So this Starter's Guide, it's relatively succinct. It's not a 20-page document. It's a visual 8-page guide that covers different parts of your farm buildings, your wetlands, your bush blocks, and it gives a bit more detail of some of the tools I've mentioned tonight. But that's the overview. There's a lot more detail behind the scenes, but hopefully that's enough to get you thinking and help you to explore some new thinking, some new ideas of how to go about it, be part of the predator-free community.
Fantastic effort, Cam. Brilliant. Thank you, my friend. Let's just get stuck into a few of the questions that have come. And if you have questions, just put them in the chat box. We'll try and get through a few of these, sort of rapid fire, really. A good one here, just how do we get started is the question. What area of the farm should we target first?
Again, it depends on what outcomes you're after. If you've got feed problems disappearing from your cow sheds or your calf sheds, or you've got disease issues that you want to manage in those places, rodent control's a really good start. Some snap traps, some good nature gas traps, some little bait stations, a few cue cards to help you understand who's about and whereabouts they are. If your interest is looking after the native birds in your bush, then obviously you're going to want to target possums, rats, and stoats in your bush blocks. So there's some really good guidance in the farm guide about how you might go about that, which traps, how far apart, how many per hectare. As I said, it depends on the animal. You need far less stoat traps on your farm than you need rat traps if you want to manage rats around your buildings or rats in your bush. So because their home range and their breeding rates are different. So try the farm guide for a starter, but think about what you're trying to achieve. It's not about no pests. It's about more birds or better environment or less damage to my feed or less damage to my pump shed, electrical equipment or whatever it is that's causing you the problem. Be outcome focused. It's not about tails on the fence.
How about weka protection with traps and poison?
Yeah, non-targets is really important. Things like kiwi, weka in the South Island, kia. Very good question. You can put baffles on most of these devices, but many you can't. And as I said, all of these tools have advantages, limitations, and consequences. It's about knowing those. So you can put weka baffles on your DOC 200s and still catch rats and stoats and the likes. So kia are a hell of more of a challenge for your high country guys. They're incredibly difficult. So there are some really clever box designs that we've deployed in the field and Wapiti area that take account of that sort of stuff. You can't just use galvanized mesh. You've got to use stainless steel mesh. You've got to protect the screw holes, or they'll rip all the wood away and steal your screws and open up the box. So kiwi, they don't go hunting for the baits that are in traps, but if they blunder into a trap and smash a beak off, then they're going to die. So if you've got kiwi in your area, then all your devices need to be raised up on ramps. It won't reduce the efficacy of the catch for the pest or predator, but it will make a big difference in protecting those taonga that you might have on your farm.
Can you talk about the scent trails and how they work?
Okay, so animals got a way more acute sense of smell than we do. So if you walk along through the bush and a deer comes along 3 hours later, he'll smell where you've walked through the bush. And it's the same for pests. If a rat runs through the bush, a stoat might come along a few hours later and smell the rat trail through the bush and think, oh, there might be a free feed here, and follow that scent trail. So if you can get scent trails opening up to your devices, that will be like spaghetti junction heading all towards your trap device. And you encourage them with food, free giveaways. Just put a little free giveaway in everybody's letterbox. Give them a few pre-feeds, leave a scent trail, leave some icing sugar, flour, and cinnamon or something for them to go, yum, that's nice. And they'll go away and share that with their mates. And everybody who comes back lays down a scent trail, and predators will queue onto that, and that'll bring them to your device. Might not guarantee they'll go in there, but it'll bring more to your device. And if you have pre-fed them before they arrive, there's a chance they'll go and engage with the new management.
Here's one from Heather. What organisations are working with farmers to help them with pest control in the communities, and how do we connect? You got some thoughts on that?
So there's a lot of regional council staff, a lot of the biodiversity staff are working with the farming community around protecting bush blocks and stuff. So start with some of your biodiversity staff in your regional council. There's a lot of really good contractors around the place. Many of them have predator-free New Zealand apprentices now as a result of Jesse's work, sort of growing the capacity in the space around the country of professional people. So, in Taupo here, we've got ePro. In the Hawke's Bay, you've got Rob Brentstrom at Better Nature. Down in the South Island, you've got High Country Contracting. There's some real talent and innovation in those companies. And if you've got issues, they can give you really good, sound, professional advice. We've run into so many of them in the South Island. It's unfair to sort of name names, but there are a lot around, and I'm sure we could put you, or Jesse's team could put you in touch with some of them, or your regional council could put you in touch with some of them, and they'll give you really sound advice because they do this for a day job.
Yeah, Predator Free New Zealand Trust, and I know Margaret very well, who answers the phone. They're always just ready to help any connections you need with different people in your region. So they're a good first call. From Greg and Angela, are there any national, regional subsidies, assistance in general, or if you have large dock boundaries? Thoughts?
Here in the Waikato, Turangi is in the Waikato region. They have a local initiative where you can apply for funding to $5,000 per land property to purchase traps. They'll give you advice about how to use them. So there are those small initiative funds. There's also a larger one, but it's very heavily oversubscribed, where you can apply for up to $40,000 for biodiversity management. So I'm sure most regional councils in the modern world where they have a new biodiversity function have similar sorts of funds. Be a matter of talking to your local biodiversity officer in the regional council. They could put you onto some of the funding streams. Many of them have those little small initiatives where you can apply for $5,000 and get some kit worth a go.
From Jamie, it's a pretty pointed question. High estimated budget to set up a 300 hectare farm, possums, cats, rats, mustelids. Is that a tough one to answer?
Oh, yeah, depends on what sort of boundaries you've got. If you've got dock boundaries or forestry boundaries, or if you've got lakes and rivers, that's really good because you've got no reinvasion from the water. It depends on your filters where your reinvasion comes from. But probably $100 to $150 a hectare to set up, and about maybe 50 to 60 hectares per annum to run, depending on whether you do the labour yourself or contract out the labour. Again, so many variables. But yeah, it really does depend on, if it was a 300 hectare farm against a big block of conservation land that had no pest control, you'd probably be up against it a bit. But if it was a 300 hectare block up against a big lake or an estuary, where half your boundary was water, it'd be a much cheaper proposition.
Maria's just come in with a good thing. She's just said, when landowners get together and put forward a joint proposal, there's a better chance of getting good dollars.
Oh, totally. And when it comes to pest control, bigger is better. If you want to do a 10 hectare island of pest suppression in a sea of pests, you're going to get swamped and overwhelmed in a heartbeat. But if you go to 10,000 hectares and all work together, you're going to have way better protection. So bigger is better when it comes to pest control. So if you can collaborate with your neighbours, that's absolutely the way to go.
Just reminding everybody, we are recording this and it will be available on our YouTube channel for Predator Free New Zealand Trust. And you can then send it to other people that weren't here. One person's actually asked for it so they can show their classrooms in schools, which would be great. There was a question here. Haven't mentioned kamate traps for rats. Our group has found them very effective and sustainable. Your thoughts, Ken?
Yep, I've used kamate traps at Waikaremoana on Rahui Island very successfully. The team up at Aniwaniwa love them. So, yep, there's a whole lot of devices out there. I haven't got experience with every single one of them. I have my favourites because I've used them and I've had success with them, but I'm sure all of you guys are the same. You've got your favourites. You've got a way of using it. It's a bit like rifles. You ask 100 hunters what's the best caliber for shooting sika deer, and you'll get 105 different answers. They've all got a favourite, and they all know how to use that favourite. So I don't mean to play favourites with particular devices, but it's about my personal experience and what I've found works for me, and I'm sure you guys have your own favourites too.
Jesse has put regional. Jesse from the trust has put regional councils are also a good point of contact for funding and support. So another good place to contact. And here's an example of the kind of questions people have. We had hares and peacocks attack young seedlings in an area of natives we planted. Any advice on how we may reduce this happening again?
I've got no experience with peacocks myself, but I know the densities that they get to in some of the Eastern Bay of Plenty landscapes, so I can imagine how much plant material they'd eat. You know, like turkeys and crops can just decimate crops. So I feel your pain. I know night shooting peacocks is an effective way because they all roost up in trees and you can go and spotlight them out. Hares travel big distances, and actual thermal night shooting is probably one of the only effective ways of getting on top of hares, but you've got to really work hard at it. The new thermal imaging gear is way better than spotlights, so a handheld thermal to find them and then a thermal scope to shoot them. Flat, straight shooting calibers, you know, 22 250s, .17s, those real fast light calibers that are very, very accurate out to sort of 150, 200 meters with thermal imaging. Really, hares are a nightmare because they eat so much and they'll just destroy new plantings. They don't take baits readily. You can't trap them. Yeah, not easy.
Not easy at all. This one from Justine. You didn't mention the AT trap. Do you rate it for possums?
The AT 220. I've seen it work really good. There was a trial done near Turangi last year, and they had some really good results. But they put game cameras on them and showed that the trap rate dropped off after a while because all the dumb ones got caught and the ones that were left were the cunning ones. So again, don't rely on a single tool. Mix it up, change your bait, and really work at attracting, pre-feeding, luring, setting up scent trails. Close the trap down for a couple of weeks, set up a possum nightclub and reopen it if your trap drops away. But yeah, as a concept, I really like the AT220. I can't afford to buy a whole lot of them because they're not cheap, but they're a really cool device that are particularly good for possums.
Here's a question. Did Cam Speedy go to Rotorua Boys High School by any chance? From Paul Hanson.
Yeah, I did, Paul. Yeah. And I used to have half a dozen Lane's Ace gin traps in my school bag that I used to check before school up the top of Altona Road.
I've got one just on that. I've got one for you. How do you stay? This is 30 years of doing this. How do you stay motivated with all this trapping? Because you can see it straight away.
I have a trap line around my farm. I've only got 5 acres, so I can check the traps every day. I go for a walk with the dog every morning. Get up and feed the animals and go and walk the trap line, and I love seeing something dead in my trap. And if I don't, I'm thinking, what am I doing wrong? How can I make it better? So I'm constantly pushing the envelope of I've had mentors, a particular guy, Eric Ball, a Scottish gamekeeper, who taught me some of the tricks. And Eric used to cart a dead stoat around his trap line with rabbit guts in an onion bag tied to the same string. So he would set up the scent trail of a stoat chasing a dead rabbit or injured rabbit, and that would just cue everything onto his trap line. So these are just ancient, intuitive, smart, professional observations over generations that we've got to share and hand out and pass around to people and make sure that everybody has them. And if you guys have any innovations, share them too, because there's some wonderful, cool stuff going on out there, and a lot of us don't know about it, so share it.
A couple of people have asked about pukeko, and they are a pain, and they're in big numbers. Can you set the sort of record straight of what we can do about them and when through the year?
I think there's still a game bird on the game bird license. You can shoot them in season with a shotgun if they're flying. I think you can also get a permit to destroy wildlife causing damage if you have a really tough time. I know at the prison farm here in Turangi, the pukeko used to come out of the Waitaka River channel and just decimate their veggie gardens. It was just soul destroying for the prisoners trying to grow veggies, and the pukekos were just smashing them. So when I worked for Doc here, we did issue permits to destroy and had some big pukeko shoots. But yeah, again, the dumb ones are easy, the smart ones get real hard.
Um, Vicky has asked, and it's always this touchy topic, and we should really just talk about it, but are there any good ways to trap feral cats? And she's just wanting to know, she doesn't think the regional councils sometimes want to know about it. And are there any agencies out there that maybe focus on them a bit more, can give good tips or help?
Nah, cats are one that agencies steer away from because of the emotive sort of backlash from cat lovers. But they're a terrible problem on our landscapes, the feral cats. And the tools that are available are pretty limited. But those traps that I had on my slide, the Steve Allen 3, the Flipping Kitty, and what was the other one? Oh, the Doc 250 kill trap. They can be really effective on cats, and what you've got to be really wary of is that cats are such cautious creatures. You've got to really win their confidence and catch them. Kittens are not so hard, but older, more mature feral cats that are doing terrible damage to waterfowl and kiwis and seal and stuff, you've got to put your smartest gamekeeper hat on to successfully catch them. And traps are really all that's work. There is a new toxin called PAP, which Helen Blackie's used with some success in Northern Hawke's Bay to get some really good kills, but you need a controlled substance license to use it. Yeah, it's actually on the market. Predastop, it's called. If you want to Google Predastop and seek out Helen Blackie's work in Northern Hawke's Bay, they got some really cool results.
Cam, you're a wonder. We thank you so much for giving up your time, 7 o'clock at night, and everybody else that joined in on this. We thank you. If you're farming at the moment, you know, and doing such a wonderful job for us through this COVID time, we thank you as farmers. And can you leave us then just with maybe people, Cam, that have just taken this up for the very first time, are interested in starting out? Can you give us just maybe something motivational to end with that'll get them, or how do they start and what do you reckon? And then we can finish on that.
Well, predator management can transform your landscape. It'll bring back quail and pheasants and tuis and kidderoo, and for me that's my biggest joy in life, is seeing wildlife around my farm and my landscape. And so it's not about killing the pests, it's actually about the outcomes, and I just love the outcomes. I've seen the incredible outcomes that good predator management can achieve. So yeah, get into it and stick with it, because it can be a thankless job on a wet, cold winter day, but boy, when the spring cranks up and the birds go mental, it's awesome.
Thanks, Cam. We're getting some great comments of how informative and inspirational a talk like this is for people that are just starting out, and some that have been doing it for some time. Okay, you can, I suppose it's time for you to hit the sack, head to bed. And it's been lovely having you on our webinar.
Yeah, thank you, mate.
Go
Awesome.
some dinner, of course.
Cheers, bro.
No trouble. Thank you, everybody. Hope to see you again very soon for our next webinar. If you need anything, just remember to contact us at the Predator Free New Zealand Trust, and we'll help you out with anything you need, and you might also be able to help us out with stuff that you're doing. We'll see you again. Thank you. Nice everybody saying goodbye in the wee chat box. That's lovely. And take care, everybody, no matter where you are, and be safe. Thank you. See you again. Bye-bye.